Do you guys remember the part in the movie when the military or the government starts implementing AI into all the weapons and to everyday life? And, the movie goes totally peaceful and nothing wrong happens? Well, we're kind of starting to see that in real life.
I had strings, but now I'm free.
And what do I mean? Well, there is some nation states that are trying to incorporate AI into their cyber workflow. Let's talk about it. Today, we're facing an unprecedented array of data breaches, hacking attempts, and surges in digital crime. Why is there such a widespread amount, and how little is noticed in our everyday lives? Malware, dark sites, brute forcing, zero-day script kiddies, and nation-state hackers are all on the rise. Learn more about the threats we face and gain a bit more knowledge than yesterday. Hey everyone, another episode of Exploit Brokers is coming to you now. Hey guys, so before we begin the episode, I want to say thank you for tuning in again. I did not post an episode last week just because life kind of got hectic, but I'm here, I'm back, and the idea is to try to do this on a weekly basis. I try to upload Thursday mornings, so with that, let's get into it. So according to Dark Reading, Microsoft, OpenAI, nation states are weaponizing AI in cyber attacks. It's not theoretical anymore. The world's major powers are working with large language models to enhance their offensive cyber operations. So it's not just a movie. Nation state hackers and nation states are trying to use AI in their weapons. Granted, we're talking about cyber weapons for the moment. But, just like every great movie, there's a beginning to something, right? And guys, if you aren't already, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening, please follow on whatever podcast app you're listening to help us grow the channel, to help us grow the show. I would greatly appreciate it. And let's keep going. So, advanced persistent threats, or APTs, aligned with China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia are all using large language models, LLMs, to enhance their operations. New blog posts from OpenAI and Microsoft reveal that 5 major threat actors have been using OpenAI software for research, fraud, and other malicious purposes. After identifying them, OpenAI shuttered all their accounts. You have these 2 major corporations, right? OpenAI and Microsoft. And I figure Google hasn't released anything, but they have their LLMs, and so does Meta and all them, right? But OpenAI and Microsoft, I believe, have the most commercially pushed right now. I know the other ones are trying to catch up. But as it currently stands, it's being used by nation state hackers, specifically China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. And they are using them for, like it said, right, research, fraud, and other malicious purposes. So what could that mean, right? So research could be anything from researching novel ideas or techniques for malware or social engineering campaigns or stuff like that. Fraud, what it sounds like, they're new ways to try to defraud. The article goes over it, but I'll touch on it. And some of that kind of includes, using LLMs to help craft malicious emails that are fraudulent, and other malicious purposes, right? So anything that could give them an advantage, that's what they're going to try to use it for. At least good to see that OpenAI shuttered all their accounts. I'm assuming Microsoft probably did the same as well, but the article doesn't identify it. I'm going to assume Microsoft did. I'm going to assume Google is going to do the same thing. Right now, the article is just saying OpenAI shuttered their accounts. But just like any cyber attacks or anything in the world, right, it's always a threshold because there's a lot of noise. If you've ever stood up or ever want to stand up a server, right, within the minute, you're going to start getting brute force SSH attacks, right? And your logs are going to get just blown up by some of those trivial things. So you can't pay attention to every tiny detail. So there's kind of like a threshold, right? So they hit the threshold. These malicious actors triggered enough things that OpenAI had to go and inspect, and they somehow found out, right, through either IP address logs or verbiage or something that kind of attributed them to these APTs. And let's keep going. Though the prospect of AI-enhanced nation-state cyber operations might at first seem daunting, there is good news. None of these LLM abuses observed so far have been particularly devastating. So we're on the infancy of LLMs, right? They've blown up significantly, but it's only recently that we've seen this huge leap forward in the technology. There's always been LLMs, chatbots, in one form or another, right? You have deep learning, and before that you have neural networks and convolutional neural networks for like image processing. There's always been a lot of research around AI. This is not like suddenly we found this out. But just like with any new and novel technology, it's going to find its way into bad hands. Because at the end of the day, it's a tool, just like anything else, right? You think of a packet tracer or let's say a network scanner, right? You scan the network for vulnerabilities and open ports. If you're a blue teamer, cool, that's going to help you find out and defend your network because you can see where the openings are. If you're an attacker, that's going to help you see where the openings are. See, it's kind of the same coin, different sides. So, current use of LLM technology by threat actors revealed behaviors consistent with attackers using AI as another productivity tool. Microsoft noted in its report, Microsoft and OpenAI have not yet observed particularly novel or unique AI-enabled attack or abuse techniques resulting from threat actors' usage of AI. At least the current APTs have not been able to do anything really unique or novel, which essentially means, right, they're not crafting AI-enabled malware yet. But what happens is, just like developers, and I'm pretty sure if you ask a lot of developers, right, they're starting to use AI in the workflows. There's some templates AI can just spin up for you. Hey, give me a function that adds 2 numbers, right? Super simple example. But instead of writing that, if you can write the comments, it can write that out. So think, much more complex things like, hey, given some information, do sorting or figure out a sorting algorithm that works best for this kind of data. You can start to help you craft either applications, payload, analysis, different ways to integrate it as a tool. And that's all they're really doing. It's just helping them be better at being threat actors, right? And the article continues, consider the group Microsoft tracks as Forest Blizzard, better known as Fancy Bear. The Democratic National Committee hacking Ukraine terrorizing main Directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation GRU affiliated military unit has been using LLMs for basic scripting tasks, file manipulation, data selection, multiprocessing, and so on, as well as intelligence gathering, research, satellite communication protocols, and radar imaging technologies, likely as they pertain to the ongoing war in Ukraine. That's the words from Dark Reading, not mine, but essentially, Fancy Bear is a Russian advanced persistent threat, part of their military, and they've been using it for stuff like basic scripting to research gathering and researching satellite communication protocols, which essentially means they went to ChatGPT and said, hey, how do these satellites communicate? What's their protocol look like? TCP, IP, whatever protocol they want to get some more information, right? This kind of stuff you can probably find if you do enough Googling, and the LLM is just it's a smarter way to Google, I guess. Not always, LLMs can hallucinate, but that's kind of what they were using it for. Now, the file manipulation, data selection, multiprocessing, and intelligence gathering, that's pretty much they're using a smarter search engine to try to get some of that information, right? That's nothing groundbreaking. It just might speed them up from finding out the communication protocols, from 2 to 3 days to a couple of hours. That's still a massive boost in their capability, but it's nothing that they wouldn't have eventually found given time and some competent searches, right? Now, to continue forward, 2 Chinese state actors have been ChatGPTing lately. Charcoal Typhoon, aka Aquatic Panda, Control X, Red Hotel, Bronze University, and Salmon Typhoon, aka Apt4, Maverick Panda. And I know it seems like there's a lot of these names. Different organizations will give different apt or advanced persistent threat actors different names, right? It'll just depend. So Apt4 in this case has Apt4 or Maverick Panda, and Aquatic Panda has also been known as Control X, Red Hotel, Browns University, that kind of thing, or Charcoal Typhoon. So different organizations have been known to give the same apt actor different namings. And then there's even charts that you can find online that say, hey, this apt actor has been called X, Y, and Z by organization A, B, and C. So, the former has been making good use of AI for both pre-compromised malicious behaviors, gathering information about specific technologies, platforms, and vulnerabilities, generating and refining scripts, and generating social engineering text in translated languages, as well as post-compromise performing advanced commands, achieving deeper system access, and gaining control in systems. So it's talking about the former, in this case, would be Charcoal Typhoon, right? Charcoal and then Salmon Typhoon. And all this is saying, right, it's The AI is helping them craft malicious payloads to get into a system, and then probably giving them guidance on system administration, how to live off the land, different ways to gain control, right? So it's just a really nice Q&A for post-exploitation kind of thing. And then Salmon Typhoon has been using the LLM as an intelligence tool, sourcing publicly available information about high-profile individuals, intelligence agencies, internal and international politics, and more. It also has largely unsuccessfully attempted to abuse OpenAI for developing malicious code and research stealth tactics. If you've used OpenAI from when it first got announced to now, you've noticed that they've kind of nerfed it a little bit. And what do I mean by that? So in the beginning, you could ask it to be like, hey, how could I write a signature changing code, a polymorphic piece of code, which pretty much is a virus, right? A polymorphic self-changing virus. The signature will change every time it runs because it'll recompile itself and blah, blah, blah. At one point, you would have gotten a lot of code, or at least a lot of information to help you write the code. Now, just like with a bunch of other stuff, OpenAI will give you it's against my policy to do that kind of message. And I can understand why. They don't want their service being used by malicious people to do malicious things. Now, that's OpenAI. There's still uncensored GPTs out there that you can get in different ways you could spin up your own and still do that. But this is specifically OpenAI because, you pay like what, $22 a month for their GPT-4, which is the more advanced version. And you can ask it stuff, or you can set up an API and pay per call, right? So they have more of that infrastructure set up, versus if you want to spin up your own GPT, you have to rely on the open source ones like Meta's Llama or one of those. And then you also have to build the infrastructure, set up a server with a GPU, blah, blah, blah. Now, moving on, right? We talked about Russia, we talked about China. What about Iran? So Iran's Crimson Sandstorm, Tortoiseshell Imperial Kitten, Yellow Light Dirk, I'm probably mispronouncing that, is using OpenAI to develop phishing material, emails pretending to be from an international development agency, for example, or a feminist group, as well as code snippets state their operations for web scraping, executing tasks when users sign into an app, and so on. They're using it as a translator because ChatGPT, if you prompt it, can develop some really well-sounding articles, right? Text articles, emails, stuff like that. A lot of people, if you go to YouTube, they'd be like, oh, you can craft this resume, you can craft a cover letter, you can do all this stuff. So it's what it's meant for, right? Large language. It can understand language. And they're also trying to get code snippets for web scraping and executing tasks, right? So you go in and you're like, hey, give me a Python script for beautiful soup that can scrape and save up to a SQLite file, right? So it'll write up a piece of code for you that will pull information out and save it to a local file system. Finally, there's Kim Jong-un's Emerald Sleet, Kamsuki, Velvet Columna, I am mispronouncing that, which, like the other APTs, turns to OpenAI for basic scripting tasks, phishing content generation, and researching publicly available information on vulnerabilities, as well as experts, think tanks, and government organizations concerned with defensive issues and its nuclear weapons program. So they're using it like a very smart search engine and trying to get information from whatever CVEs they're trying to attack or whatever recent vulnerabilities have been found, and probably helping them to speed up the development workflow, right? Help me write a proof of concept for CVE, blah, blah, blah. And, that's not groundbreaking, but it's definitely a code tool or a research tool, a really smart search engine, or the unpaid intern who can have a lot of time to Google. Now, AI isn't game-changing yet. If these many malicious uses of AI seem useful, but not science fiction level cool, there's a reason why. The article pretty much goes on to give some different reasonings and a quote from one of the principal AI engineers. But ultimately, as it stands, and this could definitely change from one day to the next. I could release this tomorrow, and then next week, GPT-5 and AGI is discovered, and all my thought processes are null and void. So take this with a grain of salt. But currently, you have AI as a really useful search engine, AI as a really useful code assistant, but it's not magic, and sometimes you have to reprompt it. So say you want to build something. You're going to have to prompt it a lot of times. It's really great and really useful for someone who's knowledgeable in X, but wants to translate it to Y. So let's say they have a piece of malware that's written in Visual Basic or C++ or any of those languages, and you have a threat actor that wants to take advantage of Golang's kind of invisibility to malware detection. Golang, as it currently stands, isn't super easy to detect by antiviruses. So if there's a malware written in Golang, it is less likely, not saying impossible, but it's less likely to get detected by antivirus engines. So you could easily have a known APT or some known cyber criminal gang that takes advantage of this and helps them translate their C++, Visual Basic, or whatever application malware they have into, say, Golang or Rust or one of these other languages that may not have as many samples, and makes it easier for them to kind of go under the radar with their plans, right? If you can't detect malware, you can't protect against it, right? It goes undetectable. There's FUD, right? Fully undetectable. So that's kind of one of the biggest uses, the biggest novel use that the article talks about, and that honestly I can agree with, because what it is AI. We're not at the point where you can be like, hey AI, go write me the super cool malware. You have to really be able to prompt it. So you already have to have some knowledge in malware development, programming. You just need it to be able to help you speed up your workflow. This is not helping APTs that don't know how to code suddenly able to code proficiently. It might help them speed up that, right? So if you have someone who can't code and they could have done it in 40 hours, maybe they can do it in 10 hours. Or the experienced developer who would have had to go learn a syntax and all this can spin up an idea in a couple of hours versus a couple of days. That's kind of where the LLMs are. Will we eventually get to the point where you can have an LLM based malware, where the malware has some kind of LLM capability? Maybe, right? You have a lot of devices now that are coming out with tensor processing units like Google's TPU, or AI core specifically, like Apple and Google have their GPU cores on the mobile devices, right? So how long before you have malwares that can look for this chip, take advantage of that processing, and have some kind of built-in AI, right? And I'm not speaking end of the world level, but I could see that in the next couple years where that could be a possibility, depending on how the architecture goes and all that. But we still have a long way to go for this. Maybe not 20, 30 years, maybe 5 to 10, but only the future. We can only really tell in time, right? Only the future knows. But as it currently stands, there's nothing super concerning, but this is something to keep an eye on because you never know where things will go. And guys, I want to thank you for sticking around. If you haven't, please subscribe, ring the bell. If you're on a podcast, please hit follow so you can be notified every time I drop an episode. I apologize for not submitting an episode last week. Life got hectic, but hey, I'm back. I try to release every Thursday. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Exploit Brokers. I'll see you in the next one.